Welcome back to the radio. What hour is it over there, and where are you listening from this time? We're glad to have you here on Quilloren Radio, where quiet stories unfold like soft paper. If this brings you calm, consider subscribing to the channel. Tonight's story finds you in the year 1610, in a candle shop nestled at the edge of a village. You are a candlemaker, steady, patient. But lately, fewer neighbors come asking for wax. Word is, oil lamps have begun to spread. They say they burn longer. But the glow is colder somehow. Without further ado, let's begin. The door creaks just before your hand touches it. Always slightly ahead of you, this place. The iron latch gives as it always does, with a sound that feels less like opening and more like agreeing to continue. You step into the shop, and the air is still, thicker than outside, and faintly sweet. Wax and old smoke cling to the rafters, too polite to leave. You leave the door ajar, not because you're expecting anyone, but because it lets the morning light slip in without bothering the shadows too much. The floor greets your boots with a long sigh, uneven boards holding on through sheer stubbornness. There's a small puddle of wax from last evening, hardened now into a rough crescent near the edge of the work table. You consider scraping it, then leave it. One more mark among hundreds. The hearth is cold but not unfriendly. There's a bit of warmth still curled in the stones from yesterday's coals. You add a few sticks, light a taper from the basket, and crouch down to wake the embers. The flame catches, slow but sure. You straighten up with the quiet sense that something, at least, has agreed to burn. A breeze noses through the door and makes the candle on the sill flicker, drawing your eye to the window. Outside, the village is slowly animating. A dog pads past, sniffing the fence post like it holds a secret. The thatcher's cart rolls by with one wobbly wheel and two wobbly sons seated on top. You watch them, just for a minute, before turning to the ledger on the work table. The page is mostly blank. A few names, and not the usual ones. Lady Marrow hasn't ordered more rose candles. The baker's wife, who used to insist on 6 night tapers a week, now swears by a lamp brought back from the city. It smells of iron and burns with a strange, stiff light. You pull the ledger toward you. The spine is cracked, and the ink is beginning to feather. You run your fingers along the edges of the entries, not to read them again, but just to feel them. The pages are thinner near the end. Not from time, but from less use. You lift your eyes and glance across the room, where the rows of finished candles sit in quiet attendance. Tapers, pillars, coils, and one oddly shaped lump you keep meaning to remelt. You haven't the heart to do it yet. At the corner of the room sits the old casting kettle, dark and squat and dusted with soot. You give it a respectful nod, then reach for the tin ladle beside it. The motion is automatic. The wax is already half melted from the heat that never quite leaves the hearth stones. You stir slowly, watching the surface shimmer. It moves like a thought you haven't decided whether to speak. A familiar rhythm begins to settle into your hands, even as your mind lingers on the emptiness of the order shelf. A soft clink draws your attention to the shelf beside the door. A stack of clay saucers shifts slightly, disturbed by the breeze. Or perhaps by nothing at all. You rise and go to check them anyway, more to move than out of worry. The saucers are fine, of course. You press your hand to the wall beside them. Cool, even now. The sun won't touch this side of the building until well past noon. You glance at the counter where the small coin box sits, its latch loosened from years of faithful but unexciting service. You open it out of habit. A few coins. Enough for flour, maybe oil for your own lamp, should you want to be ironic. You close the lid gently and let your hand rest there a moment longer than necessary. The shutters rattle once, reminding you that the breeze has grown bold. You walk over and fasten them halfway, letting in a narrower beam of light. It slices across the room, landing on a dusty pewter candle holder left by a customer who never returned for it. You've kept it out of pure laziness, or maybe a quiet hope that he'll come back and remark on how well it's aged without him. The air smells faintly of yesterday's tallow, a pinch of wood smoke, and something faintly floral, likely the last echo of a beeswax taper you burned 2 nights ago. It's a smell that doesn't insist on anything. It just is. The cat hasn't shown up yet. Normally by now she'd be pawing at the cushion beneath the stool near the hearth, displeased by its continued emptiness. You wonder if she's found a warmer spot elsewhere, perhaps next to one of those new lamps. The thought is oddly irritating. Then again, she never paid for candles. You return to the center of the room and sit on the low stool near the casting bench. The room is awake now, if quietly so. You listen to the crackle of the small fire, the soft hiss of melting wax, the wooden bones of the place shifting ever so slightly with the day's breath. There are fewer footsteps passing by outside. Fewer people needing tapers for supper or vigils. The world seems to glow a little differently now, more bright than warm. More sharp than soft. But here, in your shop, the light is still slow. It clings to surfaces gently. It understands waiting. And for now, so do you. You stay on the stool for a few minutes longer than needed. The fire in the hearth has found its rhythm, and so has your breath. The wooden beam above your head holds a small crack that splits slightly wider in colder months, and you watch it absently now, as if it might do something interesting. It won't. Still, the familiarity of it keeps your mind from drifting too far ahead. You rise slowly, the bench letting out a quiet creak of protest, or encouragement, it's never quite clear which, and you begin the usual wandering of the morning. The shelves lining the west wall hold the molded candles. You walk past them, fingertips grazing the outer edges of the tapers, just barely brushing the cool wax. They've been sitting longer than usual, waiting for homes that may not need them anymore. The thinner tapers, the ones used for reading and prayer, used to vanish quickly, bundled in twine and wrapped in rough linen. Now, they sit in rows, patient and unbothered. The beeswax pillars fare a little better, ordered still by the chapel and the stubbornly traditional apothecary who insists they calm the nerves more than lamplight ever could. You pause at the table near the window. It's mostly clear, save for a half-rolled wick, a shallow tin mold shaped like a fish, and a pair of worn scissors. The fish mold was a whim. A customer once asked for something festive, then forgot to collect it. You've used it twice since, both times with little conviction. The scissors are dull but reliable. You consider sharpening them, then remember the last time you tried. You spent an hour chasing the whetstone only to discover it had wedged itself behind a wall beam. It's still there, probably making friends with dust and spiders. Near the casting area, you check the supply jars. The beeswax is low, but not urgently so. The tallow stores, however, seem almost untouched. Fewer people want the cheaper candles now. They say lamps don't smell. They say they're cleaner. You don't disagree. But you do think something's lost in the trade. The scent of burning tallow might not be lovely, but it's familiar. It smells like evening. It smells like meals and letters and prayer. Lamps give off light, but not stories. You step over to the back alcove, where the lesser-used molds are stacked in a narrow cupboard. Shapes that were once charming and are now simply odd, a tiny horse, a scallop shell, a vaguely unfortunate-looking bird. You run your hand along the shelf, stopping when you reach the folded cloth that cushions the bottom layer. You know what's beneath it without looking, your first mold, a crooked taper form that leaked at the seams. You kept it anyway. Not for sentiment, exactly, more as a reminder of things that start poorly and still find their place. Back at the center of the shop, your eyes drift to the windowsill. A small square of folded paper sits there, catching a bit of light. You forgot to move it yesterday. It's a note from the butcher, asking if you'll be making the stubby kitchen tapers again before month's end. He'd mentioned something about stew prep being treacherous in the dark. You refold the note and tuck it behind a spool of twine. That order, at least, still holds. You wander toward the back door, the one that opens onto the little yard. You rarely use it, but sometimes in the early summer it lets in a softer kind of light. The handle sticks, as always, but you nudge it with your knee and the door gives way with a sound that might be a sigh. Outside, the yard is quiet. A few stubborn stalks of rosemary grow near the edge of the stone path. You once tried to grow lavender out here, but the soil was suspiciously hostile to anything too delicate. You step out briefly, breathe in the chill, and return inside before the wind notices you were gone. The casting kettle calls you next. You don't answer right away. You move toward the far shelf instead, where the spare lengths of wick are coiled like sleeping rope. Some are cut for long church candles, others for short desk tapers. A few coils remain unmeasured, waiting to become something or nothing, depending on how the week unfolds. You take one length and stretch it gently between your hands. It's rough but well twisted. Your fingers know how to test for the right give. You've done this thousands of times. You snip it, more for the action than the need, and set the piece down near a tray of unused molds. The light shifts. One of the shutters creaks, letting a thinner slice of brightness onto the floor. It lands near the scales. They haven't been used in 2 days. The weights sit balanced, undisturbed. You resist the urge to test them for no reason. You already know they're accurate. The stillness in the room is not the kind that demands activity. It invites it, quietly, like a pond that wouldn't mind a pebble, but won't complain if left alone. You wander back to the bench and lift the ladle again. The wax is ready now, smooth, translucent, and faintly golden. You pour into a mold slowly, watching the surface rise. It doesn't bubble. It never rushes. You place the mold down and wipe the edge of the ladle with a cloth. Another candle formed, even if it waits longer to be wanted. The shop is still. Your movements are slow, but sure. You're not preparing for anything, just continuing. The shelves bear witness. The walls remain loyal. Even the draft at the door seems less intrusive now. It all holds. For now, it all holds. The casting bench is where you always return. It's not the center of the shop by design, but by practice. A rough, wide table, stained in places you no longer remember staining, bowed slightly in the middle like it's sighing under the weight of long usefulness. The wax kettle rests near its edge, half wrapped in a scorched cloth that once had flowers on it, or so you've been told. The cloth's been there for years, and you've never had the heart or reason to replace it. You set the latest mold down to cool. The faint scent of beeswax lifts into the air, curling above the table in a lazy spiral. This is the part you like best, not the pouring, not the weighing, not even the wick setting, but this bit here, the waiting. There's nothing hurried about it. The wax settles as it will. There's nothing to fix, nothing to adjust. It simply cools into whatever shape you've given it, and sometimes into something else entirely. To the left of the bench sits a narrow shelf. On it, a few oddities that have lingered longer than their intended lifespans. A single taper warped by the sun through the window. A stub of red wax shaped vaguely like a fruit, though no one agrees which fruit. And the rosebud mold, the one Lady Marrow insists upon, though she's ordered none this month. She once said they reminded her of her sister's drawing room in Dorset, where every candle was a flower and every window was shut. You never quite knew what to make of that, but she said it fondly, so you kept making them. You run your fingers along the edge of the rosebud mold. It's slightly pitted now, the surface dulled by years of use and scrubbing. No matter how carefully you pour, the petals always seem to slouch to one side. Lady Marrow never minds. She calls it personality. You suspect she just likes the ritual of ordering something old-fashioned. Something the lamps can't mimic. Beside the mold is a square of linen, once folded, now mostly rumpled. It belongs, or belonged, to one of the manor boys. A quiet thing with good shoes and a habit of appearing at your door with vague errands. He left the cloth 2 weeks ago, Used it to wrap a half-dozen stub tapers for the guest quarters. You offered paper. He said linen made less noise. You made no comment. The cloth smells faintly of the manor's kitchens. Bread and lye soap, and a little bit of whatever they polish the banisters with. The boy never came back for it, and you've left it there since, unsure whether it's meant to be returned or forgotten. A wax-stained logbook rests on the far end of the bench, open to a page marked only with a smudge. You used to record every batch by hand, especially when the chapel was ordering in volume. Now the entries come slowly, one every few days. You still write them, even if there's little to say. Today's will likely read, 6 tapers, no destination, shelf 2. Above the bench, a low beam holds several hanging forms, tapers in different stages of drying, loops of wick waiting to be cut, and a small bundle of herbs someone once traded for a box of candles. You can't remember who. The herbs have long since lost their color and scent, but they look settled there, like they've adopted the space. You've no plans to remove them. They keep the air company. A small tin box lives underneath the bench. Inside it, not money, not tools, just things. A bit of broken pewter, a wax seal from a letter you never read, a stone with a hole in the middle, and one very small, very flat candle that refuses to burn evenly. You tell yourself you keep them for practical reasons, melting scraps, testing wick lengths. But you don't. They've simply been there too long to move. There's a tiny indentation on the bench, just left of center, where your elbow always lands. You press into it now without thinking. The grain of the wood is smooth there, worn down by repetition. It fits your arm perfectly. It always has. You glance at the rosebud mold again and consider pouring one, just to keep your hands moving. But you don't. There's no order. No occasion. And Lady Marrow might not come again. She has 3 lamps now, or so the mason's wife said last week. One with a lever and one with a mirror behind it to double the brightness. You aren't sure what that even looks like, but the way she said it made you think of foxes in wells, too clever, too deep. Still, the rosebud mold stays where it is. You dust off a bit of stray wick lint and adjust it slightly so it sits straight. No real reason. It simply seemed to prefer it that way. The air is quiet, save for the occasional click of cooling wax and the soft whisper of the fire behind you. The bench holds its warmth. The kettle keeps its hum. The mold waits, patient. And beside you, the little square of forgotten linen folds into the space like it belongs, which, by now, it probably does. You stay beside the casting bench for a while, one hand resting near the rose mold, the other settled in your lap. The quiet here has its own texture, not silence exactly, but the weight of things not needing to happen. You can hear the faint pop of cooling wax in the molds behind you, and something in the walls creaks, but not in a way that means anything urgent. Even the fire gives only the occasional breath of noise, like it knows this moment doesn't belong to movement. You glance at the low stool near the hearth and decide, with no particular rush, to make your way to it. The stool's legs are slightly uneven, and one has a small cloth tied around it to keep the wobble from becoming theatrical. You ease down onto it, careful not to disturb the cat, only to remember that she still hasn't shown up today. Probably off in some barn window chasing warmth from the wrong kind of flame. Lamps don't purr, you think. But perhaps they're easier to curl under. From this spot, you can see almost the whole shop without turning your head. The dipping frame in the far corner, where you used to hang dozens of tapers at once. The rhythm of it was comforting. Dip, lift, wait, rotate, dip again, like breathing with your arms. Now the frame mostly waits, and you let it. No need to wake it unless a proper order comes in. On the wall above the hearth hangs a wooden pegboard with a few tools, mostly left alone these days. A wick trimming scissor with handles like teardrops, a cracked ladle that leaks slightly if held at the wrong angle, and a small wooden spoon with a curved end you've used for nearly everything except what it was made for. It's oddly satisfying how long tools will stay ready for use, even when forgotten. They never take it personally. The warmth from the fire is slow to reach your feet. You shift slightly, pulling your apron over your knees like a blanket. The wool isn't thick, but it holds the day's heat in surprising ways. You lean forward just enough to feel the front of the hearthstone against your shins, then relax again into the stool's shape. It's too short to be comfortable, too narrow to be generous, but your body has adjusted to its stubbornness over the years. You don't sit in it to rest so much as to settle. Outside, the light has grown more diffuse. You glance toward the window and see nothing sharp, just the pale suggestion of trees and rooftops through the warped glass. The sky has turned to soft wool. No sound comes from the road. No visitors. No carts. Just the shop and the breath it holds. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to let your hearing stretch. There's the wax, still cooling. The tick of the shutters in the breeze. A bird outside, not close, not far. And your own breath, slow and easy. No lists to run through in your mind. No delivery to prepare. Just the day as it is. You open your eyes again, and they land on the corner where the bundles of wicks are stacked. The twine holding them together is beginning to fray. You keep meaning to cut new lengths and bind them up again, but the work is easier when orders are steady. Now, it feels like fixing rope on a ship that rarely sails. The rose mold is still on the bench, untouched. You consider lighting a candle just to break the stillness, then realize you already have. The small taper near the hearth still burns, short and steady. It casts a small oval of light onto the floorboards, which don't seem to mind the attention. You shift again, not out of discomfort, just to feel a different part of the stool press against you. The weight of your hands rests on your thighs, fingers curled in a way that suggests they might act soon, though you know they won't. Not yet. Maybe not today. It doesn't matter. The bench behind you creaks faintly as the warmth of the hearth stretches into the corners of the room. You feel the shift in air more than you hear it, the kind of stillness that carries movement only when you aren't paying attention. It's the same stillness that used to fill chapels after the last hymn, or kitchens when the bread's already baking and nothing more can be done. You reach slowly for the folded linen left by the manor boy, fingertips brushing the edge of it. The cloth has softened since he dropped it off. Absorbed a bit of wax, a bit of dust. It's become part of the place. You think of setting it aside but don't. It belongs where it is now, even if it was never meant to. Your eyes move toward the hooks near the door, where customers used to hang baskets or leave notes. Nothing hangs there today. The hooks aren't sad about it. They're made of iron and don't think in those terms. But still, they remember. The air has gone a little warmer, the light a little dimmer. You shift your legs and feel the apron cling slightly to your knees. The fire murmurs in agreement. This part of the day needs no purpose. It carries no requirement. It simply arrives and holds still. The floor groans under its own weight. Somewhere behind you, a bit of wax snaps as it settles. You don't turn to check. Everything is where it should be. You stay there, seated, warm, unmoving, held by the bench, the heat, the soft smell of old tallow and linen. The shop doesn't ask anything of you. It only receives. And you, without trying, give it exactly what it wants, stillness. If you're still listening and enjoying this quiet story, consider subscribing to Quilloren Radio. It helps keep the light burning, even if fewer want wax these days. The flame stirs slightly in its glass. You haven't moved, but the air has. Something shifts just beyond the edge of your awareness, as though the workshop itself has taken a deeper breath than usual. You glance upward, but the rafters remain still. No wind today. Just a sense that the world is leaning into something softer, like a thought that arrives before the words do. You remain at the long table, fingers smoothed with beeswax and ash, your hands half folded, half forgotten in front of you. The morning has disappeared, though the hour itself has not declared where it went. The bell in the far tower rang once, perhaps twice, and then stopped. You didn't notice it happen. It's just quieter now. Quieter in a way that feels tilted. The lines of the room have begun to blur a little, not with motion, but with a kind of doubt. The shelf in the corner appears slightly bowed, as though tired of its own precision. The small barrel near the stairs has turned to face a new direction, though you don't recall touching it. Even the stone near the hearth, the one always colder than the others, has warmed without fire. Everything is right, but none of it seems quite exact anymore. You blink, and your eyes fall to the floorboards, expecting them to creak in their usual rhythm when you step. But the sound they make is quieter than expected, like walking through memory instead of air. You move toward the back of the shop, your hands trailing across a row of unused molds that hum faintly to your touch. The sound isn't real, exactly, but it settles in the room like an old tune someone nearly remembers. The window near the back is covered in a thin layer of dust, but the light behind it is different now. Not brighter, just slightly golden, as though the sun were filtered through aged parchment. You lean closer and notice the shape of the glass itself has changed slightly. It curves inward, not like a flaw, but like a breath drawn in. It distorts the outside world in ways that feel intentional. Trees ripple like reflections in water, even though the branches don't sway. You open the back door, just enough to let your thoughts walk ahead of you. The garden, where you used to grow the lavender and rosemary for special batches, has grown tall and uneven. Not wild, exactly, but slower than it should be. A single chair sits in the middle of the grass, facing no particular direction. You don't recall putting it there, and you don't sit in it. It seems to be waiting for someone else. The sky carries a softness that doesn't belong to a specific hour. It could be late morning or a peculiar kind of dusk. The clouds are few, and the ones that remain don't drift so much as hover thoughtfully. A bird passes across the view, not flying so much as tracing a quiet path with its wings. The sound it makes is entirely inside your head. It sounds like a drawer being opened gently. Familiar. You walk toward the edge of the garden where a small fence separates your lot from the road. The fence is lower than you remember. Or perhaps you're taller. The gate is open, but not swinging. Held still by some breeze that never quite arrived. You look down and see 3 pairs of wax shoes lined neatly beside the post. You don't make shoes, and certainly not from wax, but there they are. Each one a little smaller than the next. You blink again, and you're back in the workshop, though you don't recall returning. The air is warm now. Not heated, but content. The shelf that seemed tilted earlier has corrected itself, or maybe you've matched its perspective. The small barrel by the stairs still faces the wrong direction, but now it looks like it always meant to. You don't fix it. Instead, you rest your palm on its lid for a moment, just to let it know you noticed. You cross the room to the far drawer, the one with the mismatched knob, and pull it open slowly. Inside, there are a few unused candle labels, a broken matchstick, and one tiny glass vial filled with a deep red oil. You hold it up to the light and for a moment, the whole workshop smells faintly of cherrywood and moss. Not memories, exactly, but something near them. You place the vial back carefully and close the drawer. As you turn, the air shifts again. It doesn't move, but it turns your attention toward the ceiling, where a single wax drip has reached the end of its descent and stopped just short of falling. It clings to the edge with a determination that feels oddly noble. You watch it for a full minute, unsure whether you want it to fall or not. The candle that was burning when you entered the room earlier is gone. Not extinguished, just no longer present. In its place is a small brass lamp, one of the new ones. It is not lit. It sits politely, waiting for you to notice it, which you do. Its presence is not accusatory. It is simply there. You sit at your workbench and press your hands together gently. The wax has hardened slightly between your fingers, and the warmth of your skin begins to soften it again. The room settles around you, slow and certain. The only sound now is a faint tapping from somewhere upstairs, like a branch against a forgotten window. You do not move to check it. For a moment, everything holds. The temperature. The light. The quiet understanding between the room and its contents. The new and the old. The still and the almost. You close your eyes. Not to sleep, not yet, but to listen more carefully to the way the room breathes. The boy returns, but only for a moment. You hear the latch before you see him. No knock. He steps inside like someone unsure whether the door led to the same place it did last time. His boots are cleaner. His coat is longer. His hands stay tucked in the sleeves. He doesn't glance around the shop like he used to. Instead, he goes straight to the bench. You look up from your work, though there isn't much to pretend you're working on. The wax has cooled in its pot. The molds are stacked neatly, dry. There's nothing lit on the table. Not even for comfort. He places a coin on the surface, smaller than before, and keeps his fingers on it a second longer than necessary. One taper, he says. His voice has changed. Less air in it now. He waits without fidgeting. You reach for a candle from the box beneath the bench, already wrapped in linen. You place it gently beside the coin. Not for the manor, he adds. It's for my mother. You nod, and he gives no more explanation. The coin is warm when you slide it off the table, but the warmth isn't from him. You know that kind of heat. It's the kind that comes from something being carried too long in a closed hand. He doesn't linger. As he reaches the door, he pauses and half turns. They've put in 6 new ones, he says. Lamps. In the hall. You nod again. They hum, he adds, quieter now, even when no one's near them. He leaves before you can respond. The latch closes softer this time. You sit back and look at the empty bench in front of you. The candle he took was one of your favorites. Not because of how it looked, it was uneven, a little too broad at the base, but because you'd poured it during a thunderstorm, and the rhythm of the rain had found its way into your hands. Some wax remembers the air it cooled in. You rise slowly and walk to the far shelf, where the oldest forms are kept. The ones you haven't used in months. There's dust on them, but not the kind that feels like forgetting. This dust feels like something resting. You lift one of the heavier molds. A triple chamber, meant for altar sets. It clinks faintly as you carry it back to the bench. You aren't sure why you've chosen this one. It's too large for anything the villagers might want now, and too traditional for the new style of lighting. But it sits on the table with a kind of weight you remember from earlier years. A weight that doesn't ask for permission. You fetch the last of the beeswax from the back room, scraping the inside of the jar with your thumb. Not enough to fill all 3 chambers. Maybe 1. You set the pot over the small flame, the one candle still burning at the corner of the room. It's quieter now, even with the fire. The walls have begun to lean in closer. Not suffocating. Just listening. While the wax softens, you stare at your hands. There's a cut on the edge of your thumb, from when the lid stuck earlier. The blood has dried. The skin has already started to tighten around it. It feels right, somehow, that even now your hands are trying to repair themselves. The candle the boy took will last maybe 3 nights, if it's trimmed well. 4, if she only lights it at dusk. It's not enough for a full morning, not by custom. But enough to mark the start of one. You pour the wax slowly. It doesn't hiss this time. It slides down the side of the mold and disappears into its new shape like it had always planned to. You don't tap the edge or shake the air bubbles free. Some things can stay imperfect. Behind you, the light through the front windows bends differently. The street outside looks longer than it should. You catch a reflection of someone walking past, holding a lamp high, even though it's not yet dark. The glow leaks through the seams in the shutters. It has a different color than wax. Sharper. Less forgiving. You stare at the mold on your table and wonder if there's still use in making candles that will never be burned. You could keep pouring. Stock the shelves. Call it tradition, or habit, or something slower. You could even sell them as ornaments. Some would buy them. Hang them from beams. Pretend they miss the old ways. But the boy had come back. Not for the manor. Not for status. He came for his mother. He came because some things still need flame. You look at the mold, at the wax cooling in its chamber, and you don't feel proud or nostalgic. You feel necessary. You clean the bench, wipe the rim of the wax pot, and wrap the remaining wick lengths in cloth. As you place them back on the shelf, your hand brushes a forgotten roll of parchment. You unfold it carefully. A list of past orders, dated and labeled. Some names are familiar. Some, you hadn't realized had stopped coming. You roll the parchment tight and tuck it behind the others. It isn't needed now. The candle at the corner flickers once and then again. A draft. Maybe the door wasn't latched. You walk slowly to check it. The latch is firm. But the flame dances a moment longer. You stand there watching it. A tiny fire in a fading world of wax. Enough to see by. Enough to remember your place in the room. Outside, lamps have begun to glow above the street. They don't flicker. They don't need tending. But they also don't shift when someone enters. Don't cast the kind of shadows that tell stories. You return to your bench, relight a taper, and place it near the mold. Just for company. You sit. And wait. And pour again. Someone might come. Someone always might. By late afternoon, the shop holds the sort of hush you only get in a room that remembers what it used to be for. Light filters in weakly from the high, dust-specked windows, and the air carries the faintest trace of beeswax and ash, not fresh, not unpleasant, just residual. The flame from the sconce above the ledger flickers as if bored, and you leave it alone. There's nothing left to write in the ledger today. No new orders. No deliveries to track. Only the stillness. You lean against the workbench, a place that once bore the weight of 36 tapers a day. Now it supports only you, your elbows, your thoughts. There are always thoughts, whether invited or not. The wick-cutting shears lie beside your hand, unopened. Their blades still have that fine blackened edge, from years of careful work, always warmed by the candle before use, always wiped after. You remember once, it must have been spring of 1602, when you sliced your thumb open with those shears, and bled into a pot of half-melted wax. Ruined the whole batch. You had no one to blame but yourself. But that was back when people still wanted enough candles to make accidents possible. Now, the accidents are quieter. Less blood, more forgetting. Your gaze settles on a rack of dipped tapers, mostly decorative at this point. They were meant for a wedding that was postponed again, then vanished. You sometimes think the betrothed simply stopped needing each other, in the same way the village stopped needing candles. You still dust them occasionally, more from habit than hope. There are rumors, not even whispered now, just casually spoken over bread stalls and in the back pews of the chapel, that lamps fueled with oil from whale and seed and something called campaign are becoming the standard. The manor switched nearly a year ago. The boy who used to collect candle orders for Lady Marrow now brings notes from the steward about brass fittings and glass chimney repairs. He's older, taller, and walks as if light were something owed to him. His last visit, he handed you a cracked lamp casing and asked if you knew someone who could fix it. You nodded and took it, even though you didn't. He'd glanced around the shop, as if surprised it was still here. As if some part of him thought you'd have moved on by now, taken up wood turning, or cider brewing, or left altogether. You don't hold that against him. People imagine things vanish when they no longer need them. But you're still here. You look down at your hands, slightly stiff now, a bit more papery than they used to be, and remember what they once knew without thinking. How to pour just enough without causing a dip, how to judge wick by weight, how to tell, simply by scent, if the tallow had turned before the boil. These are not impressive skills. They don't earn applause. But they made light. And light used to matter. Your chair creaks as you sit near the fireless hearth. Not long ago, it was always warm here, not hot, just constant, and the floor had smudges where wax would drip and harden and be scraped and drip again. You can still find a few spots if you squint. Sometimes you try to picture the future, though it's difficult. Maybe it's a prideful habit, or maybe just curiosity that hasn't been scraped out of you yet. You imagine the building turned into something else. A weaver's shop, perhaps. Or a storage room for someone who sells glass bottles and tools you don't recognize. You wonder if they'll notice the faint outline on the walls where the candle racks used to hang, or the burn mark beside the hearth where you once dropped a whole tray of votives. You wonder if they'll care. And if someone a century from now stumbles into this room, child, merchant, stranger, will they know this was once a place of light? Not the light that hums or buzzes or clicks on with a lever, but light born from wax and wick, one breath away from darkness. Will they know this place warmed corridors, sanctuaries, quiet corners? That it kept vigils company and let lovers see each other properly in the half-glow? Or will it all sound absurd to them? Sentimental. You pull a taper from the wall, one of the old ones, cured and waiting for a day that didn't arrive. You strike a match. The flare is brief, and then the wick takes. The flame stands as tall as it ever did, unaware of its obsolescence. It flickers softly in the workshop, casting gentle shadows across your table, your tools, your silence. Some things don't argue about being forgotten. They just burn anyway. You set the candle near the window, not because you need it there, but because the light looks better in that spot when the sun sets. There's a small comfort in that, even if you're the only one who'll notice. It's possible you'll make another batch tomorrow. You haven't decided. There's still wax in the cellar, and the molds are clean. But maybe you won't. Maybe tomorrow you'll go to the market, buy a bit of fruit, and not explain to anyone what you used to be. Maybe you'll sit in the chapel for a while and let the new lamps warm the air. You don't hate them. You just don't trust them not to fail when something important is being said. You glance back at the taper. It's half burned now, and the wax has pooled at its base. You'll have to scrape that later. Not today. You let the light linger as long as it can. The shop doesn't close in the usual way anymore. There's less to tidy. Fewer crumbs of wick to sweep, fewer drips to scrape. No deliveries to set aside. No notes to prepare. You light a taper near the door, more for yourself than any passerby. Evening settles across the village like a worn cloak. Familiar. A little frayed at the corners. Outside, the glow of oil lamps now dots the streets in a regular, assertive rhythm. They give off a hum, just soft enough that you notice only in contrast to the quiet. They aren't loud, they're confident. Light that doesn't ask permission. You stand just beyond your own threshold, watching it all unfold. One of the new lamps near the baker's shop flares briefly, then steadies. The road is mostly empty, most people are already indoors now, reading or eating or forgetting. You hold your candle just a little higher, and its glow spills faintly across the stone. A weak answer to the steady pools of lamplight around you. A young couple passes, arm in arm. He carries a stubby brass lantern swinging from a loop of cord, already common enough that no one comments on its shine. They don't look toward your window. Not out of rudeness, just efficiency. Inside, the air is warm with the last heat of wax, still softening in the kettle though no more will be poured tonight. A few votives from earlier sit cooling in their tin molds. You nudge one with your finger. Still pliant. There was a time you could judge the room's temperature just by the texture of wax. Now you use the back of your hand. It's less romantic, but more practical. At the back wall, the old display shelf has thinned. Not from sales. From retreat. You've taken to storing more of the stock in the cellar now, out of sight. Customers are too rare, and the open shelves made the quiet more visible. Some candles remain, a few devotional tapers, some citron blocks that never sold well, and a single thick pillar wrapped in dark string, a leftover from a batch meant for a wedding that was quietly cancelled 3 summers ago. You kept it anyway. Something about the weight of it. Some candles aren't made to be used. You light one now, a simple taper, and let it stand alone near the workbench. The flame is gentle, but carries itself with dignity. It flickers once, adjusts, and finds balance. You've always thought candlelight had personality, not in a fanciful sense, just attitude. It changes when you're watching. It behaves differently depending on what it's lighting. It's reactive, but not obedient. You take a seat on the stool you've used for more years than you remember. One leg is shorter than the rest, and you always have to shift slightly to find its rhythm. The habit is so ingrained now that sitting on a level chair feels wrong. On the wall near the door, the old chart still hangs, the color guide you made for beeswax versus tallow mixes, adjusted for smoke and burn rate. No one's asked to see it in 5 years, but you dust it once a week anyway. There's a quiet respect in keeping these things alive, even if no one's looking. The upstairs room calls to you tonight. It hasn't, for a while. You don't keep anything important up there anymore, just a chair, a table, and a few items you couldn't bear to throw away. You carry the candle as you go, its flame steady in your cupped hand. The stairs are familiar, but still surprise you. A step that creaks too early. Another that barely registers weight. At the top, the door opens into stillness. The air is different here, not stale, just preserved. The amber room, you used to call it. Not aloud, of course. Just in your mind. It caught light in a certain way, once. The angles of the walls, the pale finish of the planks, something about it always turned golden when enough candles were burning. You'd test your best ones here. The perfect cylinders. The cleanest wicks. Let them speak for themselves. You place the candle down on the low table, beside an old ledger you no longer write in and a pewter spoon bent into a shallow curve from some forgotten accident. You sit. The chair wobbles slightly. You adjust without thinking. Below, you can hear a faint clink as wax settles in the kettle. Your ears know the weight of every sound in this building. If something were truly out of place, you'd know before you stood up. You look around the room and try to imagine it without you. Not in a morbid sense. Just curiously. If someone took over, a cooper, a printer, a scholar, would they notice the burn mark near the window frame? Would they know how to fix the window when it sticks in winter? Would they bother? The candle burns steadily beside you. Its scent is faint. Beeswax and cotton. Clean. You wonder how long before someone forgets what real candles used to smell like. The oil lamps don't smell of anything. That's part of their appeal. No mess, no soot, no scent. Just light. But sometimes people don't know what they've given up until they need it back. You lean back and close your eyes briefly. You're not tired, exactly. Just full. The kind of full that comes from knowing you did something for a long time and mostly did it right. Not perfectly. But with care. You didn't cut corners. You didn't overfill the molds. You kept the trimmings for emergencies, but never resold them as new. These things matter. Maybe not to others, but to you. The candle has begun to lean slightly. It won't last much longer. You watch it as it works. And when it finally folds, wick curling, light shrinking, you don't replace it. The dark isn't unkind. It just knows when it's time. The evening settles into the corners of the shop without ceremony. The windows, though smudged from time and steam, catch the last of the light as it leans into the hills beyond. You've already put away the tools, wiped down the table, and stacked the molds that saw no use today. The silence isn't sudden, it crept in, companionably, some time ago. You sit in the old chair. It creaks in the same place as ever, a brittle note under your left shoulder. The cushion is more suggestion than support now, but you don't mind. From here, the shop looks smaller, as it always does when you're seated, as though the day collapses its shoulders and becomes something more private. The smells have softened too, the lingering beeswax, the cold metal of the tools, and the faintest edge of lamp oil from the manor's last delivery. Your hands rest loosely in your lap. They're no longer stained with the browns and yellows of daily work, but there's still a fine residue if you press your thumb into your palm, a memory of the trade, held in the skin's quiet folds. You flex your fingers slowly, not from pain, but familiarity. Even now, the movements echo the rhythm of dipping wicks, pouring tallow, trimming the cooled tapers to uniformity. At this hour, there's nothing more to shape. Not from wax, not from the day. You listen instead. A horse cart rolls by in the distance, its wheels murmuring over the uneven path. Somewhere behind the neighboring wall, a child calls out, met by a soft reply. A dog barks once, then reconsiders. The world has not stopped, it just doesn't lean as hard on your threshold anymore. You glance toward the drawer near the bench. Inside, you know, are the last few coin slips from the manor, folded twice and tucked behind a spool of linen wick. They're not dated, but you remember when they came. The orders had begun thinning already. First the church candles were trimmed from 8 to 4. Then the hallway tapers were deemed unnecessary, replaced by something brighter, cheaper, less warm. Lady Marrow hadn't written in her usual looping hand after that. A servant's mark, neat but indifferent, had taken its place. You never resented it. Not really. You simply noted it, like one notes the weather or the slow decay of a fence post. And now, here you sit, in a quiet shop that's still full, just not full of orders. It holds memory. Routine. Dust, certainly. But also something that doesn't require coin or purpose. Your gaze drifts to the far wall. A small shelf, long bowed from the weight of too many candle stubs, holds a row of test batches that never found favor. A crimson-dyed taper, too dear to repeat. One shaped like a flower, beautiful, but unstable. And that squat thing that never quite dried right, even after a week in the cellar. You didn't throw them out. It felt wrong. They belonged here, even in their unlit state. The candle burning now, a simple one, unscented, is nearly spent. Its flame has dipped low, flickering against the wax collar that's pulled along its base. You lean forward and nudge the plate a touch, catching a stray drip before it can fall to the floor. It's a motion you've done 1,000 times, always with the same 2 fingers. It doesn't matter that no one else is watching. It matters to you. You think again of the boy, now a young man, who brought the last delivery. How he looked at the shelves. Not with pity, but curiosity. The way someone might study a bird's nest long after it's been abandoned, wondering who had lived there and why they'd left. You wonder if he'll ever come back, even out of habit. Or if the shop will simply be remembered as a place with candles long after candles became optional. There's comfort in not knowing. It means anything is possible, even quiet endurance. The fire is gone now. Only a faint thread of smoke curls toward the ceiling, carrying the last of the day's heat with it. You rise, slowly, not because you're tired, but because the light has left and your body knows it's time to stop pretending the work continues. You walk toward the stairs, the same route, the same pace. The boards offer the same slight groan beneath your weight, one after another, never varying. Halfway up, you stop, not to think, but to feel. Just for a breath. The kind that expands the chest and reminds the bones they're still arranged in the right order. The wax, the wicks, the molds, they'll be there tomorrow. Or not. But tonight, they remain. Upstairs, the cot welcomes you without question. The blanket has found its way back on top, folded in the same imperfect triangle you've used for years. You lie down slowly. No rush, no resistance. The room smells faintly of old wax and something like lavender. Probably the sachet that fell behind the shelf last spring and never found its way out again. You decide to leave it. Below, the shop rests. Not closed, not finished, just resting, as it has every night since the first candle dried here. Outside, the wind turns cool. Somewhere, a lamp hums. But not in this room. Not here. It is late now. The kind of late where the sky has stopped arguing with the night, and even the birds have decided to let the darkness win for a while. Your eyes are closed, though you're not quite asleep. There's still enough of you present to feel the familiar weight of the blanket, to hear the timbers creak with the cooling of the house. Each sound is old. Practiced. Friendly. There is no candle burning in the room tonight. You didn't light one. Not because you forgot, but because you didn't need to. The shadows knew their places already. The furniture cast no surprises. The moon offered just enough through the slats to keep things honest. You hear the wind press softly against the shutters. It's gentle, like a polite tap on the door from someone who has nowhere urgent to be. The kind of wind that asks, not insists. You let it be. It doesn't need a reply. Your thoughts shift, not with words but with impressions, small flickers of memory that rise like sparks from a long-cooled hearth. You remember the smell of beeswax in late summer, when it would melt too quickly and you had to time your pores between clouds. You remember the slight thrill of an unbroken mold, the quiet pride in a row of finished tapers, all trimmed and standing like soldiers in a row. You remember your father's hands, older than yours ever were, holding a wick straight while the first layers cooled. He didn't speak much during the work. Only nodded once, when it looked right. And you remember the silence of the first day no orders came. How the quiet felt not like absence, but pause, as though the world were thinking something over. Your breathing steadies. Slows. Outside, someone walks past on the road. Boots on stone. Not hurried. Not lost. Just passing through. You imagine they carry a lantern, one of the new ones, with oil that burns clean and long. You don't mind. Light is light. And someone should still carry it. You drift further. The workshop exists now only in corners of your mind, the weight of the molds, the soft clink of cooling wax, the slight hiss when a wick catches just right. None of it presses. It floats. Familiar, but light. In the dream that comes next, if it's a dream at all, you're standing behind the counter, and the shop is full again. Not loud, but busy. A gentle buzz, like bees in the rafters. People you've known appear in quiet turns. The baker, wiping flour from his hands. The old curate, asking again for altar candles that don't drip. Even Lady Marrow's steward, hesitant but polite, laying out a list he barely understands. They nod. You nod. No words are needed. And then the boy enters, the one who used to fetch the odd orders, now tall and unfamiliar, yet somehow still carrying the same uncertain curiosity in his eyes. He doesn't ask for lamps. He picks up a taper, turns it once in his fingers, and waits. You wrap it, your hand steady. He pays with exact coin. No extra. No less. Just right. Then the shop fades again, and you are weightless. Somewhere, a door closes. Not hard. Just enough. Somewhere, a candle is lit. And somewhere, quite possibly not far, the old tools remain, not needed, but not discarded. The world has changed, yes. But you haven't vanished. You've simply grown quiet. and in the quiet, you remain.